A vet stumbles upon a lifeless puppy on a desolate road, but as he brings it back from the edge, he uncovers puzzling signs that hint at an extraordinary secret. Dr. Nathan Hart didn't often stop on his way home. After long hours at his clinic, tending to everything from feisty tabby cats with minor scrapes to loyal German shepherds requiring intricate surgeries, he usually went straight to his small ranch-style house on the edge of town. But that cold November evening, as he drove down the winding back road lined with bare trees, he caught sight of a tiny figure by the roadside that made him slam on the brakes. At first, Nathan thought it was just a piece of trash, or maybe a bundle of rags blown by the wind. But something about its shape nagged at him, and he pulled over, flicking on his hazard lights. He stepped out into the biting wind, pulling his jacket tight around his broad shoulders, and approached cautiously. As he drew closer, his heart sank. It wasn't trash. It was a puppy. The little creature lay on its side, shivering so violently Nathan could see its ribs quivering with each tiny breath. Its matted fur was streaked with mud, and its eyes were barely open. Nathan crouched down and reached out, murmuring softly, "Hey there, buddy. It's okay. I've got you." The puppy didn't resist as he scooped it into his arms. It was light, alarmingly so, and its small frame radiated heat. A fever, no doubt. Nathan's mind raced as he carried it to his car. Dehydration, malnourishment, possible infections. The list of concerns was endless. He placed the puppy gently on the passenger seat, wrapping it in the emergency blanket he always kept in his trunk. Back at the clinic, Nathan moved with practiced efficiency. Though he was the only one there after hours, he preferred working alone when it came to emergencies like this. He started with fluids, injecting a saline solution to combat dehydration. He cleaned the mud from the puppy's fur, revealing a patchwork of pale tan and creamy white. It had no collar or tag, nothing to indicate where it had come from. He checked for a microchip, but found none. "You're a mystery, aren't you?" Nathan murmured as he gently examined the puppy. Its eyes flickered open for a moment, revealing a striking shade of blue. Despite its condition, there was a spark in those eyes that tugged at Nathan's heart. By the time he'd stabilized the puppy enough to leave it resting comfortably in a warm kennel, Nathan felt a glimmer of hope. It would take days, maybe weeks, for the little one to recover fully, but he'd seen worse cases pull through. As he locked up the clinic and headed home, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary stray. Over the next few days, Nathan devoted every spare moment to the puppy's care. He brought it home each night, unwilling to leave it alone at the clinic. His golden retriever, Daisy, seemed to sense the fragility of their new housemate and kept a respectful distance, her wagging tail the only sign of her excitement. Nathan quickly realized that the puppy was special. It wasn't just its unusual blue eyes or the faint, almost symmetrical markings on its face. There was something in its demeanor, an intelligence, a quiet resilience. The little one, whom Nathan began calling Scout, seemed to understand what was happening. It submitted to the treatments without much fuss, as if it knew Nathan was trying to help. As Scout grew stronger, Nathan noticed other peculiarities. The puppy's energy seemed boundless despite its recent ordeal. It would follow Nathan around the house, its tiny paws padding softly on the hardwood floors. And then there were the strange behaviors. The way Scout would tilt its head as if listening to something Nathan couldn't hear, or the way it seemed to recognize objects and commands far beyond what Nathan had taught it. One evening, about a week after he'd found Scout, Nathan decided to take Daisy and the puppy out to the backyard. It was a clear night, and the stars were bright overhead. As Daisy trotted off to sniff at her favorite spots, Scout stayed close to Nathan, its small form quivering with excitement. Nathan tossed a tennis ball, half expecting Scout to ignore it. Instead, the puppy took off like a rocket, retrieving the ball with the precision of a seasoned retriever. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Nathan chuckled as Scout dropped the ball at his feet, tail wagging furiously. But the real surprise came the next day. A local woman named Mrs. Jenkins, known for her endless neighborhood watch updates, stopped by the clinic. She'd heard about the puppy and came to see it for herself. As soon as she laid eyes on Scout, her expression changed. "Well, I'll be," she said, her voice a mix of amazement and curiosity. "That looks an awful lot like the dogs from the old Miller place." Nathan frowned. "The Miller place? You mean the abandoned farm out by the ridge?" Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "That's the one. The Millers used to breed fancy dogs, expensive ones too, but they moved away years ago, and the place has been empty ever since. Still, I'd swear that Pup has the same markings as one of their prize litters." Nathan's curiosity was piqued. After Mrs. Jenkins left, he did some digging. The Miller family had indeed been well known in the area for their specialty dog breeds, but they'd left town abruptly, and rumors swirled about financial troubles. Nathan couldn't find much about what had happened to their dogs. That night, as he sat with Scout curled up on his lap, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that the puppy's origins were tied to something more significant. The markings, the intelligence, the almost uncanny connection he felt, it all pointed to a story yet to be uncovered. And Nathan was determined to uncover it. Scout's recovery continued, and with each passing day, the bond between man and puppy grew stronger. But questions lingered, and Nathan knew he wouldn't rest until he found the answers. Little did he know, the truth about Scout's past would lead him down a path he never could have imagined, changing not just the puppy's life, but his own as well. Nathan couldn't shake the unease that settled over him after Mrs. Jenkins' visit. The idea that Scout might have come from the Miller property opened a door to a host of questions, and Nathan couldn't help but feel an obligation to dig deeper. He spent the next few days keeping a close eye on Scout while quietly researching the Millers. Between clinic appointments, he combed through local records and asked subtle questions around town. It turned out that the Miller family had left abruptly, and though there were plenty of rumors, hard facts were scarce. Some said they'd gone bankrupt. Others claimed there had been legal trouble. What no one seemed to know was what had happened to the dogs they were so well known for breeding. Scout, meanwhile, continued to thrive. The little pup's energy was boundless, and its intelligence shone through in every interaction. Scout learned commands faster than any dog Nathan had ever trained, responding not just to verbal cues, but to subtle gestures and even changes in tone. It was as if the puppy could anticipate what Nathan wanted before he even said it. At the clinic, Scout became something of a mascot, charming both staff and clients alike. Daisy, ever the patient and gentle companion, seemed to take on a maternal role, keeping an eye on Scout as it explored every nook and cranny of Nathan's home. But the peculiarities surrounding Scout only grew. One night, Nathan was woken by a soft whimpering sound. Groggy, he stumbled out of bed and found Scout sitting in the living room, staring at the front door. The puppy's ears were perked, its gaze fixed as if it were waiting for someone. Nathan knelt beside Scout and stroked its fur, but the puppy didn't relax. It wasn't fear or anxiety. Scout seemed alert, focused, as if sensing something Nathan couldn't perceive. "What is it, buddy?" Nathan murmured, glancing out the window. The street was quiet, the night still and uneventful. Yet Scout remained tense, its tail stiff, eyes never leaving the door. It wasn't until Nathan gently picked the puppy up and carried it back to bed that it finally settled down, curling into a tight ball against his side. The next morning, Nathan decided to take a closer look at the Miller property. It had been years since he'd driven out that way, but the place wasn't hard to find. The old farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt road, its paint peeling and shutters hanging crookedly. A tangle of overgrown weeds choked the yard, and the barn in the back was missing half its roof. Nathan parked his truck and stepped out, Scout cradled in one arm. The puppy's nose twitched as it sniffed the air, its body quivering with excitement or nerves. Nathan couldn't tell which. As he approached the house, Nathan noticed signs that someone had been there recently. Footprints in the dirt, a fresh padlock on the barn door, and a faint trail leading from the driveway into the woods. His gut told him to be cautious, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He circled the property, taking note of the small details. A faded "for sale" sign leaning against the porch, a pile of discarded dog bowls near the barn. Scout squirmed in his arms, letting out a small bark that echoed in the stillness. "Easy, Scout," Nathan whispered, setting the puppy down. Scout immediately darted toward the barn, sniffing around the base of the door. Nathan followed, his heart pounding. He tested the padlock and found it secure, but as he turned to leave, he caught sight of something unusual in the dirt. A small tuft of fur snagged on a splintered board. The fur was sleek and white, matching the lighter patches on Scout's coat. Nathan's mind raced as he drove back to town. The fur could have come from any animal, he told himself, but the coincidence was too strong to ignore. He decided to send it to a lab for testing, hoping to confirm whether it matched Scout's DNA. In the meantime, he focused on gathering more information about the Millers. His research led him to an old newspaper article detailing a dispute between the family and a local animal welfare group. The group had accused the Millers of unethical breeding practices, citing overcrowded kennels and lack of proper care. The case had been dropped for lack of evidence, but the allegations had left a stain on the family's reputation. As the days passed, Nathan began to notice more strange behaviors from Scout. The puppy's uncanny ability to recognize objects and people was almost unsettling. One afternoon, a man walked into the clinic with a Labrador retriever for a routine checkup. Scout, who had been lounging in the corner, suddenly perked up and ran to the man, wagging its tail furiously. The man laughed and bent down to pet the puppy, but Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that Scout knew him somehow. Later, he asked the man if he'd ever owned or worked with dogs, but the man shook his head, looking puzzled. Nathan's suspicions deepened when the DNA results came back. The fur from the barn was a match for Scout. It confirmed what Nathan had already suspected. Scout had come from the Miller property. But what did that mean? Had the Millers left behind other dogs? Were there more like Scout out there, struggling to survive in the wilderness? Determined to find out, Nathan decided to visit the property again, this time with backup. He called his friend and fellow veterinarian, Dr. Emily Carter, who worked at a nearby clinic. Emily was a practical, no-nonsense type with a knack for solving problems. When Nathan explained the situation, she agreed to join him without hesitation. Together, they returned to the Miller property early on a Saturday morning. This time, Nathan brought tools to break the padlock on the barn. As they pried the door open, the musty smell of hay and decay hit them like a wave. Inside, they found rows of empty kennels, each one lined with straw and old chew toys. The barn was eerily silent, but as they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon something that made Nathan's stomach churn. In the far corner of the barn, hidden behind a stack of hay bales, was a small enclosure with a litter of puppies. They were alive, but barely, their tiny bodies trembling with cold and hunger. Nathan and Emily worked quickly, wrapping the puppies in blankets and carrying them to the truck. Scout, who had been waiting outside, barked excitedly as they emerged, wagging its tail as if to say, "I told you so." Back at the clinic, Nathan and Emily got to work, administering fluids and checking each puppy for signs of illness. It was a long night, but by morning, the puppies were stable. Nathan couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he watched them snuggle together in a makeshift pen, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. The discovery of the puppies raised more questions than answers. Why had they been left behind? Who had been caring for them, if anyone? And what role did Scout play in all of this? Nathan knew he was only scratching the surface of a much larger mystery, one that would require patience and persistence to unravel. For now, though, he was content to focus on the task at hand, giving these puppies a second chance at life. As the weeks went by, Nathan and Emily worked tirelessly to care for the puppies. Scout seemed to take on the role of a big sibling, playing gently with the younger dogs and showing them the ropes. Daisy, ever the nurturing soul, joined in, her maternal instincts kicking into high gear. The clinic became a bustling hub of activity, with clients and neighbors stopping by to check on the puppies and offer their support. One evening, as Nathan sat on the porch with Scout curled up at his feet, he couldn't help but reflect on how much his life had changed since finding the little puppy by the roadside. Scout had brought chaos and questions, but also a sense of purpose and joy he hadn't felt in years. And though the mystery of Scout's origins was far from solved, Nathan felt a growing sense of hope that he was on the right path, for both himself and the dogs who had come into his care. As winter settled over the small town, Nathan found himself immersed in the ongoing care of the rescued puppies. The clinic was livelier than ever, with staff and volunteers pitching in to ensure each puppy received the attention and love it needed. Scout continued to thrive, its playful antics and boundless energy bringing smiles to everyone who walked through the door. Yet, amid the daily chaos, Nathan couldn't shake the lingering questions about Scout's origins and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the Miller property. One crisp December morning, Nathan received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to a man named Jim Thatcher, a retired sheriff's deputy who had worked in the area during the Miller's time. "I heard about your rescue from my granddaughter," Jim said, his voice gravelly but warm. "And I've got a hunch you might want to hear what I know about that old farm." Nathan's interest was immediately piqued. They arranged to meet at a local diner later that afternoon. When Nathan arrived, Scout accompanied him, its head poking out of a cozy sling. Jim was waiting at a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. He was a wiry man in his 70s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "You weren't kidding when you said you found a special pup," Jim said, nodding at Scout. "That one's got a spark to him, just like the Miller's dogs used to." Nathan slid into the booth, curiosity bubbling over. "So you knew the Millers well?" Jim nodded, setting his cup down. "As well as anyone could. They kept to themselves mostly, but their dogs were famous around here. Not just for how they looked, but for what they could do. Smart as a whip, those dogs were. Almost too smart." Nathan frowned. "Too smart?" Jim leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "There were rumors, you know. Folks said the Millers were doing more than just breeding. Experimenting, some claimed. Genetic stuff. Way ahead of what most people understood back then. They called it improving the bloodline, but a few of us thought it was something else entirely." Nathan's mind raced. "Are you saying Scout?" "Could be one of theirs," Jim finished, nodding. "Wouldn't surprise me. That farm, it wasn't just a breeding operation. I'd bet my badge they were up to something bigger. When they left, it was like they vanished into thin air. No one really knows why, but there were whispers. Lawsuits, government interest, things like that." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you think there's anyone left who might know more?" Jim sat back, scratching his chin. "There was a vet who worked with them for a while. Dr. Charlotte Keene. She left town not long after the Millers did, but I've heard she's still practicing somewhere up north. If anyone could tell you more about what went on there, it'd be her." After thanking Jim for his time and insight, Nathan returned to the clinic, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He couldn't ignore the weight of what Jim had said. If the Millers had indeed been involved in advanced genetic work, it could explain Scout's extraordinary abilities, but it also raised questions about the ethics and consequences of their actions. Determined to follow the lead, Nathan began tracking down Dr. Keene. It took several days of phone calls and internet searches, but he eventually located her at a small veterinary practice in Vermont. When he finally reached her by phone, she sounded wary but agreed to meet with him after he explained his connection to Scout and the Miller property. The trip to Vermont was a long one, but Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that it was necessary. He brought Scout along, bundling the puppy into a travel crate lined with soft blankets. As they drove through snow-dusted landscapes, Nathan found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in the past few weeks. Scout had brought an unexpected sense of purpose and adventure, and he was grateful for it, even as the mystery deepened. Dr. Keene's clinic was a modest building nestled in a quiet town. She greeted Nathan at the door, her expression guarded but curious. She was a tall woman in her 60s, with sharp features and piercing gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "So you're the one who found one of the Miller's dogs," she said, motioning him inside. "Let's see this pup." Nathan set Scout down on the floor, and the puppy immediately bounded over to Dr. Keene, its tail wagging furiously. Her stern expression softened as she crouched down to greet it. "Well, I'll be," she murmured, running her hands gently over Scout's coat. "It's been years since I've seen one like this." Nathan couldn't contain his questions any longer. What exactly were the Millers doing? And how does Scout fit into all of this? Dr. Keene straightened up, her expression somber. The Millers were brilliant, but they were also reckless. They were experimenting with selective breeding and genetic modifications, trying to create the perfect dog. They wanted animals that were not just loyal and intelligent, but capable of things most people wouldn't believe. "Scout here. It's a miracle this little one made it to you. Most of their projects didn't end so well." Nathan's stomach turned. "What happened to the others?" Dr. Keene hesitated. Some were sold off to private buyers who didn't ask too many questions. Others, well, let's just say the Millers didn't have much regard for what they considered failures. When the lawsuits started piling up, they packed up and disappeared. I left before it all fell apart. I couldn't be part of it anymore. Nathan felt a mix of anger and sadness. And Scout? What do you think makes Scout different? Dr. Keene studied the puppy for a long moment. This one's special. You can see it in the eyes, the way it carries itself. Whatever they were trying to achieve, Scout might be the closest they ever got. But that also means Scout could be in danger. If anyone connected to the Millers finds out, they might come looking. The thought sent a shiver down Nathan's spine. He thanked Dr. Keene for her honesty and promised to stay in touch. As he drove back home, his mind raced with plans to protect Scout and ensure the other rescued puppies had a chance at a good life. He couldn't change the past, but he could do his best to make up for the Millers' mistakes. Back in town, Nathan's focus shifted to finding homes for the puppies. With the help of Emily and the clinic staff, he organized an adoption event, carefully screening potential adopters to ensure each puppy would be well cared for. Scout, however, stayed with Nathan. The bond they shared was too strong to break, and Nathan knew he couldn't let the little pup go. As the weeks turned into months, life settled into a new rhythm. The mystery of the Millers lingered in the background, but Nathan chose to focus on the present. Scout continued to grow, its intelligence and personality shining brighter every day. And though the questions about its origins remained, Nathan found peace in knowing he was giving the puppy the love and care it deserved. But deep down, he knew the story wasn't over. The threads connecting Scout to its past were still there, waiting to be unraveled. And when the time came, Nathan would be ready to face whatever lay ahead, with Scout by his side. The sound of rain pattering against the windows filled Nathan's living room as he sat on the floor, a cup of tea steaming beside him, and Scout sprawled lazily across his lap. The cozy atmosphere was a welcome reprieve from the whirlwind of recent events. Nathan found himself reflecting on everything that had happened since he'd first spotted the tiny, shivering puppy by the roadside. While he cherished the bond he'd developed with Scout, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that their story was far from over. Nathan's thoughts turned to Dr. Keen's warning. If there was even a chance that someone connected to the Millers might come looking for Scout, Nathan needed to be prepared. He had no intention of letting anyone take the puppy from him, but the idea of the Millers or their associates still lurking in the shadows was deeply unsettling. Scout shifted slightly, letting out a small sigh as its blue eyes fluttered open. Nathan smiled down at the puppy, gently scratching behind its ears. "Don't worry, buddy," he murmured. "I've got your back." The next morning, Nathan decided to take action. He began researching ways to secure his home and the clinic, installing cameras and upgrading the locks on all the doors and windows. He even set up a fenced play area in his backyard, ensuring that Scout and Daisy had a safe space to roam. It wasn't paranoia, Nathan told himself. It was precaution. In the weeks that followed, Nathan's life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The puppies from the Miller property had all found loving homes, and the clinic was busier than ever. Scout continued to amaze everyone who met it with its intelligence and charm. But Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One evening, as Nathan was locking up the clinic, he noticed a car parked across the street. It wasn't unusual for people to stop and admire the building, especially since it had been recently renovated, but this car had been there for nearly an hour. Nathan's chest tightened as he watched the vehicle. The driver appeared to be on the phone, glancing occasionally toward the clinic. Nathan decided to approach. With Scout trotting at his side, he crossed the street and tapped on the driver's window. The man, startled, rolled it down slightly. He was middle-aged, with a clean-shaven face and piercing gray eyes that reminded Nathan of Dr. Keen. "Can I help you?" Nathan asked, keeping his tone neutral but firm. The man hesitated, his gaze flickering to Scout. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice smooth but cautious. "I was just admiring your clinic. It's a beautiful building." Nathan didn't buy it for a second. "Thanks. We're closed for the evening, though. If you have a pet in need of care, I'd be happy to help during business hours." The man nodded, offering a tight smile. "Of course. I didn't mean to bother you. Have a good night." Nathan stepped back as the car pulled away, his unease growing. He made a mental note of the license plate and decided to keep a closer eye on Scout in the coming days. The next morning, Nathan shared the encounter with Emily, who immediately suggested contacting the police. "If this guy is connected to the Millers, you don't want to take any chances," she said. "Better safe than sorry." Nathan agreed, filing a report and providing the license plate number. While the officer who took his statement assured him they'd look into it, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to take matters into his own hands. Determined to learn more about the Millers, Nathan reached out to Jim Thatcher again. The retired deputy was more than willing to help, inviting Nathan over to sift through old case files and photographs from his time on the force. Scout came along, settling on Jim's rug while the two men worked. "Here it is," Jim said, pulling out a faded manila folder. "Everything we had on the Millers. Not much, but maybe it'll give you some answers." Nathan flipped through the contents, his eyes scanning old photographs of the Miller property and notes from the investigations. One image caught his attention. A grainy photo of a young woman standing beside a sleek, white dog that bore a striking resemblance to Scout. "Who's this?" he asked, holding up the picture. Jim squinted at it. "That's Evelyn Miller. She was the daughter. Quiet kid, kept to herself. But she was the one who handled most of the dogs. Word was she had a real gift with them." Nathan's heart raced. Could Evelyn still be out there? If anyone knew the truth about Scout's origins, it would be her. "Any idea where she might be now?" Nathan asked. Jim shook his head. "Last I heard, she'd left the state, but that was years ago. If she's still around, she's doing a good job of staying off the radar." Nathan spent the next several days trying to track down Evelyn, scouring online records and reaching out to contacts who might have information. It was slow work, but he refused to give up. The encounter with the man outside the clinic had only reinforced his determination to uncover the truth. Finally, Nathan caught a break. A colleague of Emily's mentioned hearing about a woman who fit Evelyn's description working at an animal sanctuary in Colorado. The sanctuary, located in a remote mountain town, was known for its work rehabilitating abused and neglected animals. With renewed purpose, Nathan packed a bag and made arrangements to visit the sanctuary. He brought Scout along, hoping the puppy's presence might jog Evelyn's memory or encourage her to open up. The drive was long, but the breathtaking scenery and Scout's playful energy kept Nathan's spirits high. When they arrived, the sanctuary was a sprawling haven of open fields and cozy enclosures. Evelyn Miller was easy to spot, her tall frame and confident posture making her stand out among the staff. She was in the middle of tending to a group of rescue dogs when Nathan approached, Scout trotting eagerly at his side. "Excuse me?" Nathan said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Are you Evelyn Miller?" Evelyn turned, her sharp features softening as her eyes fell on Scout. For a moment she looked as though she might cry. "Where did you find that dog?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan explained everything, from the night he found Scout on the roadside to his discoveries about the Miller property. Evelyn listened intently, her expression a mixture of sadness and relief. "I thought they were all gone," she said when he finished. "When my family left, I tried to save as many of the dogs as I could, but it wasn't enough. Scout must have been one of the last." Evelyn's voice broke, and she took a moment to compose herself. She went on to explain how her parents' obsession with creating the perfect dog had spiraled out of control, leading to their eventual downfall. "I wanted no part of it," she said, "but I couldn't stop them. When everything fell apart, I ran. I've been here ever since, trying to make up for the damage they caused." Nathan felt a wave of compassion for Evelyn. She had carried the weight of her family's mistakes for years, dedicating her life to helping animals in need. He asked if she'd be willing to help him ensure Scout's safety and uncover any remaining ties to the Millers. Evelyn agreed, and together they began piecing together the final fragments of the puzzle. With her knowledge and Nathan's determination, they hoped to protect Scout and ensure that no other animals would suffer from the Millers' experiments. As they worked, Scout seemed to thrive in the sanctuary's environment, playing with the other dogs and charming everyone it met. Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Though their journey was far from over, he knew they were on the right path, one step closer to finding the truth and building a brighter future for Scout and all the animals whose lives had been touched by the Millers. As Nathan settled into a temporary routine at the animal sanctuary, his days became a blend of care for Scout, research with Evelyn, and assisting with the many animals under the sanctuary's care. It wasn't long before Evelyn's guarded demeanor began to soften, her initial wariness replaced by a sense of trust. She seemed especially drawn to Scout, often crouching down to observe the puppy's behavior with a mix of admiration and sadness. One afternoon, as they worked side by side tending to the animals, Evelyn shared more about her past. "You have to understand," she began, her voice tinged with regret. "My parents weren't bad people, at least not in the way you might think. They genuinely believed they were doing something revolutionary, something that would change the way humans and animals coexist, but their ambition blinded them to the consequences." Nathan nodded, encouraging her to continue. "What exactly were they trying to achieve?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated, as though weighing how much to reveal. "They called it the Harmony Project," she said at last. "The idea was to create a breed of dogs that could bridge the gap between instinct and reason, animals capable of understanding human intentions at a level far beyond basic training. They wanted dogs that could anticipate needs, solve problems, even act as companions for people with disabilities in ways no animal ever had before." Nathan frowned. "That doesn't sound inherently harmful. What went wrong?" Evelyn's expression darkened. "The methods? My parents weren't content to rely on traditional breeding or training techniques. They experimented with genetic modifications, selective breeding programs that pushed the limits of what was ethical. And when things didn't go as planned, they discarded the results." Nathan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd seen the aftermath of unethical breeding practices before. Animals with deformities, chronic illnesses, or behavioral issues. But the thought of it happening on such a calculated scale was deeply unsettling. "Scout," he said quietly. "Do you think Scout was part of that?" Evelyn looked at the puppy, who was happily chewing on a stick nearby. "I'm certain of it," she said. "The markings, the intelligence, the way it bonds so deeply with people, it all fits. Scout is exactly what my parents were trying to create. But that also makes Scout a target. If anyone from their circle finds out, they'll want to claim the dog as their own." The weight of her words settled heavily on Nathan. He'd grown to love Scout like family, and the idea of losing the puppy to the remnants of the Miller legacy was unbearable. "Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen," he said firmly. "Scout's with me now, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it safe." Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Evelyn worked tirelessly to piece together the remaining threads of the Miller's story. Evelyn's knowledge of her parents' research proved invaluable, as did the old files and documents she'd managed to save before leaving the farm. Together they created a comprehensive picture of the Harmony Project and its potential implications. But their efforts didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Nathan returned from a supply run in town, he noticed a black SUV parked near the sanctuary's entrance. The vehicle's windows were tinted, and its engine idled quietly, giving it an ominous presence. Nathan's pulse quickened as he parked his truck and approached cautiously. The SUV's driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man in his 40s with a neatly trimmed beard and sharp, calculating eyes. "Dr. Hart, I presume?" the man said, his tone polite but firm. Nathan's instincts screamed at him to be on guard. "Who's asking?" he replied, keeping his voice steady. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Carter. I represent an organization with a vested interest in the work conducted by the Miller family. We've been made aware of your involvement with one of their creations." Nathan's stomach churned. "If you're looking for Scout, you're wasting your time," he said. "That dog isn't going anywhere." Carter's smile faltered. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. Scout represents years of research and investment. My employers have a right to reclaim what's theirs." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Scout isn't property, and whatever rights you think you have, they don't hold up here. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He turned to walk away, but Carter's voice stopped him. "You're making a mistake, Doctor. Hart. We'll be in touch." The SUV drove off, leaving Nathan seething. He relayed the encounter to Evelyn, who shared his concern. "They won't stop," she said grimly. "Not as long as they think they can get their hands on Scout." The sanctuary's staff rallied around Nathan and Evelyn, vowing to protect Scout and the other animals from any potential threats. They implemented additional security measures, including cameras and motion detectors, and organized a rotation of volunteers to keep watch during the night. Despite the tension, Nathan and Evelyn pressed on with their work. They uncovered evidence that some of the Miller's associates had continued their experiments after the family's disappearance, operating under different names and organizations. It became clear that the Harmony Project's legacy extended far beyond the farm, where it had begun. One breakthrough came in the form of an encrypted file Evelyn had retrieved from her parents' records. With the help of a tech-savvy volunteer at the sanctuary, they managed to decrypt it, revealing detailed notes and data on the genetic modifications used in the Harmony Project. The file also contained a list of names, individuals and organizations that had funded or collaborated on the research. Nathan's eyes scanned the list, his heart sinking as he recognized several prominent names. These weren't just obscure scientists or small-time investors. They were influential figures with the resources to pursue the Millers' work on a global scale. "This is bigger than we thought," Evelyn said, her voice laced with unease. "If they've continued the research, there could be more dogs like Scout out there, maybe even other animals." Nathan nodded. "Then we need to expose this. If we can bring this to light, maybe we can stop them." They began compiling their findings into a comprehensive report, documenting everything from the Millers' early experiments to the current activities of their associates. Evelyn reached out to a trusted journalist she'd known from her past, someone with a reputation for exposing corruption and unethical practices. The journalist agreed to meet with them, intrigued by the scope of the story. As they prepared for the meeting, Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The encounter with Carter had made it clear that they were running out of time. Whoever was behind the continued experiments wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who got in their way. On the day of the meeting, Nathan, Evelyn, and Scout traveled to a neutral location to hand over their findings. The journalist, a sharp-witted woman named Karen Blake, listened intently as they laid out their case. By the time they finished, her expression was a mix of shock and determination. "This is explosive," Karen said. "If what you're saying is true, this could blow the lid off a massive conspiracy, but it's going to take time to verify everything and get it ready for publication. You need to be careful in the meantime. If these people are as powerful as you say, they won't take this lying down." Nathan and Evelyn promised to stay vigilant, but as they left the meeting, a sense of unease lingered. They'd taken a significant step toward exposing the truth, but the path ahead was fraught with danger. Nathan tightened his grip on Scout's leash, vowing to protect the puppy no matter what. The air was heavy with tension as Nathan drove back to the sanctuary. Scout, curled up in the passenger seat, seemed to sense the unease, glancing up at Nathan with its bright blue eyes. Nathan reached over to scratch the puppy behind the ears, drawing a small wag of the tail in response. "Don't worry, buddy," Nathan murmured. "We're in this together." The meeting with Karen Blake had been a critical step, but it also made the stakes crystal clear. Nathan and Evelyn had just handed over evidence that could potentially unravel a powerful network of individuals and organizations. The reality of what they were up against weighed heavily on him. When they arrived at the sanctuary, Evelyn was waiting by the main entrance. She waved him inside, her expression serious. "Any problems on the way back?" she asked. Nathan shook his head. "No, but I'm not taking any chances. We've got to double down on security. Karen said it could take weeks to verify the information and prepare it for publication. And until then, we're exposed." Evelyn nodded. "Agreed. I've been thinking about moving some of the more sensitive documents off-site, just in case. Maybe even digitizing them and storing them in a secure cloud server. Good idea, Nathan replied. And I think it's time we started coordinating with someone who can help us defend ourselves if things escalate. Do you know anyone? Evelyn's brows furrowed as she considered the question. I might. There's a retired Marine I know. Goes by the name of Jack Turner. He's a security consultant now and specializes in high-risk situations. If anyone can help us prepare, it's him. Nathan felt a flicker of relief. Do you trust him? With my life, Evelyn said firmly. I'll call him tonight. Over the next few days, preparations at the sanctuary intensified. Jack Turner arrived the following morning, a no-nonsense man in his 50s with a rugged build and an air of quiet authority. After a thorough assessment of the property, he laid out a plan to fortify the sanctuary's defenses. First thing, Jack said, pointing to a map of the property, we're setting up motion sensor lights and cameras at all entry points. Second, I'll train the staff on basic security protocols. Everyone needs to know what to do if something happens. Evelyn and Nathan nodded, fully committed to the plan. Scout, meanwhile, became a constant presence during their planning sessions. The puppy's sharp instincts and near-constant alertness seemed almost uncanny, as if it understood the gravity of the situation. Jack, a self-proclaimed not-a-dog person, found himself warming to Scout, often sneaking at scraps of food during breaks. As the days turned into weeks, the sanctuary's transformation was remarkable. High fences now surrounded the property, and every building was equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. Staff members were trained to recognize and respond to potential threats, and Jack even arranged for a few trusted individuals to serve as overnight guards. Despite the precautions, tension remained high. Carter's words lingered in Nathan's mind, a chilling reminder that their adversaries wouldn't back down easily. Yet, even in the face of uncertainty, there were moments of levity. Scout's playful antics brought smiles to everyone's faces, offering a much-needed reminder of why they were fighting so hard. One evening, as Nathan and Evelyn reviewed their next steps, a notification from one of the sanctuary's new security cameras interrupted them. The monitor displayed a shadowy figure lingering near the back fence. Nathan's heart raced as he grabbed a flashlight and headed outside, Evelyn close behind. By the time they reached the fence, the figure was gone, but they found evidence of tampering. The padlock on the gate had been partially cut, and fresh footprints led away from the property. They're testing us, Evelyn said, her voice tight with anger, trying to see how far they can go. Nathan nodded grimly. Then we need to show them we're ready. Jack, alerted to the incident, wasted no time in tightening the sanctuary's defenses further. Additional guards were brought in, and the perimeter was patrolled regularly. Evelyn and Nathan worked late into the night, strategizing and ensuring every detail of their plan was airtight. Amid the mounting pressure, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Karen Blake called to inform them that her team had verified a significant portion of the evidence they'd provided. It's solid, she said, enough to start drafting the story, but there's one piece we're missing, something that ties everything together. What do you need? Nathan asked. Confirmation that the Miller's associates are still actively pursuing the Harmony project, Karen replied. If we can prove that, it'll blow the whole operation wide open. Nathan and Evelyn exchanged a glance. They knew where they needed to look. The encrypted files they'd retrieved from the Miller's records. The files contained references to several active locations linked to the project, but accessing them required resources they didn't have. Jack, however, had a solution. I know a guy, he said, a cybersecurity expert who's worked on some high-profile cases. If anyone can crack those files, it's him. Within days, the expert, a tech-savvy woman named Riley, arrived at the sanctuary. Armed with a laptop and a formidable knowledge of encryption, Riley dove into the files. It was painstaking work, but her expertise paid off. By the end of the week, she'd uncovered detailed plans for ongoing experiments, along with locations of labs and facilities tied to the Harmony Project. The revelations were staggering. Not only were the experiments continuing, but they had expanded into new territories, with animals beyond dogs now being subjected to genetic manipulation. The implications were chilling, and Nathan felt a renewed sense of urgency to expose the truth. With Karen's help, they prepared to release the story. The sanctuary became a hive of activity as they gathered their evidence and coordinated with journalists and legal experts. The final days leading up to the publication were fraught with tension, but also a sense of purpose. They were on the brink of something monumental, and the weight of that responsibility was not lost on any of them. On the night before the story was set to go live, Nathan found himself sitting outside with Scout, staring up at the stars. The puppy leaned against him, its small body warm and comforting. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" Nathan said softly. "From a scared little pup on the side of the road to the heart of something bigger than either of us could have imagined." Scout tilted its head, as if understanding every word. Nathan smiled, a sense of calm washing over him. No matter what lay ahead, he knew they were ready to face it together. The sun had barely risen when Nathan woke to the sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. He fumbled for it, his heart leaping to his throat as he saw Karen Blake's name on the screen. "Karen?" he answered, sitting up straight. Her voice was steady but urgent. "Nathan, we've got a problem. My editor just called me. The story's being delayed. Apparently someone higher up got cold feet after receiving a warning. A very serious warning." Nathan's blood ran cold. "What kind of warning?" Karen hesitated. "An anonymous threat. It was vague but specific enough to make them nervous. It mentioned you, Evelyn, and Scout by name." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. "So what now? Are they pulling the story completely?" "No," Karen said quickly, "but they're demanding more time to double-check everything. They're claiming it's about accuracy, but we both know it's fear. This puts us in a tough spot. We need to decide whether to wait it out or go to another outlet." Nathan exhaled, his mind racing. "Let me talk to Evelyn. We'll figure out the next move." Karen agreed and hung up. Nathan immediately got dressed and headed to Evelyn's office. She was already awake, poring over security footage from the previous night. When Nathan relayed Karen's call, Evelyn's expression darkened. "We can't wait," she said firmly. "The longer we sit on this, the more time they have to cover their tracks or come after us. If Karen's editor won't run the story, we'll find someone who will." Nathan nodded, but the weight of the situation was beginning to press down on him. Every step forward seemed to bring new risks, and the thought of Scout being dragged into the crossfire made his stomach churn. They spent the rest of the morning exploring their options. Evelyn reached out to a few independent journalists she trusted, while Nathan worked on consolidating their evidence into a streamlined, irrefutable package. Jack Turner, ever the strategist, suggested they create a backup plan to release the story themselves if all else failed. "If we go that route," Jack warned, "we'll be painting a target on our backs. But it might be the only way to get the truth out there." As the day wore on, tensions at the sanctuary continued to rise. Riley, their cybersecurity expert, intercepted several attempts to breach their network, likely from individuals trying to access the Harmony Project files. Each failed attempt only confirmed what they already knew. Someone was desperate to keep this story buried. That evening, Nathan sat with Scout by the fire, the puppy's calm presence offering a brief reprieve from the chaos. But even as he stroked Scout's fur, his mind remained restless. How far were they willing to go to protect this little dog and expose the truth? The answer came sooner than expected. The next day, a courier arrived at the sanctuary with an unmarked envelope. Inside was a typed letter that sent chills down Nathan's spine. Cease all actions related to the Miller case immediately. You've been warned once. This is your final warning. The consequences will not be limited to you." The letter was unsigned, but the message was clear. Nathan handed it to Jack, who studied it with a grim expression. "They're escalating," Jack said. "This isn't just intimidation anymore. They're trying to scare you into silence." Evelyn's response was immediate and resolute. "It won't work. We've come too far to back down now." Jack nodded. "Then we need to be ready for whatever comes next. From now on, no one goes anywhere alone. We stick together, and we stay vigilant." The sanctuary's staff took the warning to heart. Patrols were increased, and everyone carried radios to ensure constant communication. Riley implemented additional layers of digital security, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to access their files. Despite the precautions, a sense of unease settled over the sanctuary, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were walking a dangerous line. Meanwhile, Karen continued to push her editor to move forward with the story. "We're sitting on a bombshell," she argued during one heated phone call. "If we don't act now, we'll lose the chance to make a real impact." But the editor remained cautious, unwilling to risk the publication's reputation without ironclad assurances. Frustrated but undeterred, Karen began exploring alternative options, including releasing the story through independent channels. As the days passed, Nathan and Evelyn worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable fallout. They knew that once the story went public, their lives would never be the same. But they also understood the stakes. This wasn't just about Scout or the Sanctuary. It was about exposing a network of corruption and exploitation that had gone unchecked for far too long. One night, as Nathan reviewed the latest draft of the report, Scout suddenly perked up, its ears swiveling toward the window. Moments later, the Sanctuary's alarm system blared to life. Nathan's heart raced as he grabbed a flashlight and ran outside, joined by Evelyn and Jack. The source of the disturbance was immediately apparent. A group of intruders, dressed in black and wearing masks, was attempting to breach the perimeter. Jack's team reacted swiftly, using their training to confront the threat. The Sanctuary's security measures held, but the encounter left no doubt that their enemies were growing bolder. In the aftermath, Jack gathered the staff and volunteers for a meeting. "Tonight was a warning shot," he said. "They wanted to test our defenses and rattle us, but we held our ground, and we'll keep holding it, no matter what." The staff responded with a mix of determination and fear. They were in uncharted territory, but their commitment to protecting the Sanctuary and its mission remained unwavering. The next morning, Karen called with unexpected news. "We've got a green light," she said. "The story's going live tomorrow, but I need you to be ready. Once this hits, things are going to move fast." Nathan felt a surge of relief and apprehension. "We're ready," he assured her. That night, the Sanctuary was quieter than usual, the weight of anticipation hanging in the air. Nathan stayed up late, going over every detail of their plan. Scout lay at his feet, its steady breathing a comforting reminder of why they were fighting so hard. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Nathan felt a sense of resolve. The truth was finally coming to light, and there was no turning back. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. The morning light crept over the Sanctuary, illuminating a scene of quiet determination. Staff and volunteers moved purposefully through their tasks, their resolve fortified by the knowledge that the truth was about to be unleashed. Nathan couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and tension as he watched the final preparations unfold. The story was scheduled to go live in just a few hours, and with it, the secrets they had worked so hard to uncover would be laid bare for the world to see. Scout stayed close to Nathan's side, its usual playful energy subdued as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Evelyn joined him near the main building, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. "It's surreal, isn't it?" she said, her voice quiet but steady. "We've been fighting for this for so long, and now it's finally happening." Nathan nodded. "It feels like the calm before the storm. Once the story is out, we'll have to be ready for anything." Evelyn glanced at Scout, her expression softening. "At least we know why we're doing this. It's not just about the past or the Millers. It's about protecting every animal like Scout from the people who think they're nothing more than experiments." Nathan reached down to scratch Scout's head, drawing a small wag of the tail. "And we'll protect them," he said firmly. "No matter what." As the hours ticked by, the sanctuary's security measures were tested and retested. Jack Turner and his team patrolled the perimeter, their presence a reassuring reminder that they were prepared for any immediate threats. Riley monitored the sanctuary's digital systems from a secure room, ensuring that no last-minute cyber attacks could disrupt their plans. At precisely noon, Karen Blake called to confirm that the story had been published. "It's out there," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "The response is already pouring in. This is going to make waves, Nathan. Be ready." The sanctuary erupted into cautious celebration. Staff members gathered in small groups to read the article, their expressions a mix of awe and satisfaction. The story was thorough and compelling, detailing the Millers' experiments, the ethical violations, and the ongoing efforts to continue their work under new guises. Karen had included testimonials from experts, leaked documents, and images of Scout as a living example of the project's implications. But the momentary victory was quickly overshadowed by a sense of looming uncertainty. By mid-afternoon, Nathan's phone was flooded with messages and calls. Some were from supporters offering words of encouragement, while others were less friendly, ranging from veiled warnings to outright threats. It was clear that the story had struck a nerve. Evelyn joined Nathan in his office, her expression grim as she held up her own phone. "We've got a problem," she said. "A prominent investor named in the article is already pushing back. They're calling it defamation and threatening legal action against Karen, the publication, and us." Nathan's jaw tightened. "We expected this," he said. "They're trying to discredit us and intimidate us into silence, but the evidence is solid. They won't win in court." "Maybe not," Evelyn said, "but that won't stop them from making our lives miserable in the meantime." Jack entered the room, his demeanor as calm and composed as ever. "We've got movement near the north fence," he said. "Looks like a couple of guys scoping out the area. They haven't made a move yet, but they're definitely not here by accident." Nathan exchanged a tense glance with Evelyn. "Do you think it's related to the article?" "Hard to say," Jack replied, "but we're not taking any chances. I've got 2 of my guys watching them. If they try anything, we'll intervene." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. The sanctuary's phone lines were flooded with inquiries, some from journalists seeking additional information, and others from concerned citizens wanting to know how they could help. Karen called again to report that the story had been picked up by several major news outlets, amplifying its reach and impact. But as the day turned to evening, the sense of unease grew. The men near the north fence had disappeared, but not before leaving behind a chilling message. A spray-painted warning on the sanctuary's gate that read, "Stay silent or pay the price." Jack's team acted swiftly, removing the graffiti and tightening security even further. Evelyn and Nathan convened an emergency meeting with the staff, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and caution. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "But we're doing the right thing. Don't let their threats shake you." That night, Nathan found it difficult to sleep. He lay awake, listening to the soft sounds of Scout breathing beside him. The puppy's presence was a reminder of why they were fighting so hard. But it also underscored the stakes. If their enemies were willing to go this far, what else were they capable of? The next morning brought a new wave of challenges. Social media was ablaze with debates about the article, with supporters and detractors clashing in heated arguments. Nathan received a call from Karen, who sounded both exhilarated and exhausted. "The story is everywhere," she said. "It's dominating the news cycle. But the backlash is intense. We're getting threats, and a few of our sources are starting to backtrack, claiming they were misquoted or misunderstood." Nathan felt a surge of frustration. "They're trying to undermine us," he said. "We need to stay focused and keep pushing the truth." "Agreed," Karen said, "but be careful. These people are playing dirty, and they're not above using scare tactics." As the days passed, the situation grew increasingly volatile. The sanctuary's staff faced harassment from unknown callers, and several volunteers received anonymous messages warning them to leave. Jack's team intercepted another attempted break-in, this time thwarting 2 individuals who had tried to disable the security cameras. Despite the challenges, the sanctuary's resolve remained unshaken. Nathan and Evelyn continued to work closely with Karen and her team, providing additional evidence and countering misinformation. They also launched a fundraising campaign to support the sanctuary and its mission, garnering an outpouring of support from animal lovers around the world. One evening, as Nathan and Evelyn reviewed the latest developments, Riley burst into the room with a triumphant grin. "You're not going to believe this," she said, holding up a USB drive. "I just cracked another layer of encryption on the Miller files, and what I found changes everything." Nathan and Evelyn leaned forward eagerly as Riley explained. The decrypted files contained detailed correspondence between the Miller's associates, including plans to expand their experiments into human applications. The implications were staggering, providing irrefutable evidence of the project's unethical scope and ambition. "This is the smoking gun," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we release this, they won't be able to deny what they've done." Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we release it. No more delays, no more waiting for the perfect moment. We're exposing everything." With the new evidence in hand, Karen and her team prepared a follow-up story that would leave no room for doubt. The sanctuary braced for the inevitable backlash, knowing that the next chapter of their fight was about to begin. The sanctuary buzzed with quiet urgency as Nathan and Evelyn prepared for the release of the follow-up story. Every member of the team seemed to sense the weight of what was coming. The decrypted files Riley had uncovered left no room for doubt about the extent of the Miller's experiments. The scope of the Harmony Project had far exceeded anyone's worst fears, delving into areas that were not only unethical, but deeply disturbing. Nathan couldn't shake the image of one of the documents Riley had shown him, a series of charts detailing neurological manipulation, with annotations suggesting the possibility of using the same techniques on humans. It was a level of cruelty and hubris that made his stomach turn. He looked over at Scout, who lay curled up on a blanket near his desk, blissfully unaware of the storm they were walking into. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. Nathan met her gaze. "We have to be. If we hold back now, they'll just keep getting away with it. This story isn't just about the past. It's about stopping what's still happening." Evelyn nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's make sure they can't bury it this time." Karen Blake called later that afternoon to finalize the details. The new story would be released in a coordinated effort with multiple outlets, ensuring that no single entity could be pressured into retracting it. "This is the big one," Karen said. "Once it's out, the world will know exactly what these people are capable of. But you need to be prepared for the fallout." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. "We're ready," he said. "Whatever it takes, we'll see this through." The hours leading up to the release were tense. Jack's security team doubled their patrols, and Riley worked tirelessly to ensure their digital files were backed up and protected. Nathan and Evelyn went over the evidence one last time, checking for any gaps or vulnerabilities. By the time the story went live, the sanctuary felt like a fortress, a small but determined stronghold against the forces that sought to silence them. When the article hit the news, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Headlines screamed about the Miller's experiments, the involvement of prominent figures, and the horrifying potential for human applications of their techniques. Social media erupted in outrage, with hashtags calling for justice and accountability trending within hours. But as expected, the backlash was equally fierce. Lawyers representing several individuals named in the article issued statements denying the claims and threatening lawsuits. Anonymous accounts flooded the sanctuary's social media pages with vitriol, accusing them of fabricating evidence and tarnishing reputations for personal gain. Nathan tried to focus on the positive responses, messages of support from animal welfare advocates, scientists, and ordinary citizens horrified by the revelations. But the threats weighed heavily on him, especially as they grew more specific. One email stood out in particular, sent from an untraceable account. "You've made a grave mistake. Walk away now, or Scout won't be the only casualty." Nathan showed the message to Jack, who immediately implemented additional security measures. "These people are desperate," Jack said. "Desperate people make mistakes, but they're also dangerous. We need to stay one step ahead." As the sanctuary adjusted to its new reality, Nathan found solace in the small moments: Scout's boundless energy, Daisy's quiet companionship, and the unwavering support of the staff and volunteers. But the tension never fully abated. Each day brought new challenges, from dealing with legal threats to managing the sanctuary's public image. One afternoon, Evelyn called Nathan into her office. She was seated at her desk, staring intently at her computer screen. "I think I found something," she said, motioning for him to join her. Nathan leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the document on the screen. It was a contract, buried deep within the files Riley had decrypted. The contract outlined a partnership between the Millers and a biotech company based overseas. The language was dense and technical, but one detail stood out: a shipment of animals scheduled to be sent to a facility in Eastern Europe for further experimentation. "This is it," Nathan said, his voice taut with urgency. "This proves they're still operating. If we can track this shipment, we can expose the entire network." Evelyn nodded, already typing furiously. "I'll contact Karen. If we can intercept this shipment or at least get photographic evidence, it'll be game over for them." The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. Karen's team worked with international journalists and animal welfare organizations to track the shipment's route. Jack reached out to his network of contacts, coordinating with local authorities and activists who could help on the ground. As the pieces fell into place, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against the clock. The individuals behind the Harmony Project would do everything in their power to protect their interests, and the closer they got to exposing the full extent of the operation, the more dangerous it became. The night before the shipment was scheduled to depart, Nathan sat alone in his office, reviewing the latest updates. Scout lay at his feet, chewing contentedly on a toy. Nathan reached down to scratch the puppy's ears, drawing a happy yip in response. "You don't know how important you are, do you?" Nathan said softly. "All of this, it's for you and every animal like you. You deserve a life free from fear and pain." Scout looked up at him, its blue eyes bright and trusting. Nathan felt a surge of determination. No matter what happened, he would see this through to the end. The next day, the operation to intercept the shipment was set in motion. Karen's contacts had pinpointed the shipment's location to a small airfield outside a remote European town. Local activists, posing as delivery workers, managed to gain access to the facility and document the animals being loaded onto crates marked with the biotech company's logo. The footage was damning. It showed emaciated dogs, some with visible scars, being packed into crates alongside other animals, primates, rodents, and even exotic species. The activists uploaded the footage in real time, ensuring that the evidence was broadcast to millions before the shipment could be moved. When the story broke, the backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Governments and regulatory agencies were forced to act, launching investigations into the biotech company and its partners. Arrests were made, and several facilities linked to the Harmony Project were shut down. Back at the sanctuary, Nathan and Evelyn watched the news unfold with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had won a significant battle, but they knew the fight wasn't over. The forces they were up against were powerful and resourceful, and there were undoubtedly more secrets waiting to be uncovered. As the sanctuary settled into a new sense of normalcy, Nathan reflected on how far they had come. Scout, once a fragile and frightened puppy, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, Nathan knew one thing for sure: they would face whatever came next together. The sanctuary's atmosphere remained tense but focused in the aftermath of the shipment's interception. News outlets around the globe continued to cover the story, uncovering additional layers of the Harmony Project's dark history. Public outrage grew, and petitions demanding justice for the animals flooded social media and government offices alike. While the tide of public opinion was firmly on their side, Nathan and Evelyn knew they couldn't afford to relax. The fight was far from over. Scout's role in the operation's success had become a symbol of hope for many. Images of the puppy, its striking blue eyes gazing trustingly at Nathan, circulated online alongside headlines detailing the abuses of the Harmony Project. At the sanctuary, visitors arrived daily, some bringing donations and others offering to volunteer. Despite the increased attention, Nathan remained cautious, aware that their enemies were likely regrouping and planning their next move. One morning, Evelyn called Nathan into her office, where Riley was already seated, typing furiously on her laptop. "We have a new lead," Evelyn said, gesturing for Nathan to take a seat. Riley turned the screen toward him. "While reviewing the shipment's data logs, I found references to another facility, this one located in South America. It's a remote site, heavily guarded, and not listed in any of the official documentation we've seen so far. My guess is it's one of their most secure locations." Nathan frowned. "What kind of operations are they running there?" "That's the thing," Riley said. "It's not entirely clear, but based on the notes I've decrypted, it looks like this is where they've been developing the next phase of the Harmony Project. It's bigger than just animals. They're experimenting with biotechnological interfaces, aiming to create hybrids that blur the line between species." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "Hybrids?" Evelyn nodded grimly. "This isn't just about animals anymore. If we're right, they're pushing boundaries that no one should cross. We need to shut this down before it goes any further." They spent the rest of the day planning their next steps. Riley worked to gather more information about the South American facility, while Jack coordinated with his network to identify local contacts who could assist on the ground. Karen was brought into the loop, agreeing to collaborate with international journalists to ensure the story reached a global audience. As the pieces came together, Nathan found himself reflecting on how far they had come. Scout, who had once been a fragile and frightened puppy, was now a symbol of resilience and hope for countless people. Yet, as much as he wanted to focus on the positive, the weight of what lay ahead was impossible to ignore. The journey to South America was long and arduous. Nathan, Evelyn, Jack, and Riley traveled with a small team of trusted allies, determined to see their mission through. Scout stayed behind at the sanctuary under the watchful eye of the staff, much to Nathan's reluctance. "I'll bring you back a world where you can just be a dog," he promised the puppy before leaving. Upon arriving at their destination, the team was met by local activists who had been working to expose illegal operations in the region. They provided valuable intel about the facility's layout, security measures, and the individuals running it. The facility was located deep within a dense jungle, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that was heavily monitored. Nathan's heart raced as they finalized their plan. The goal was to gather irrefutable evidence of the facility's activities while minimizing the risk to their team. Jack's military background proved invaluable, as he outlined a strategy that balanced caution with effectiveness. The night of the operation was humid and eerily quiet. The team moved through the jungle with practiced precision, their flashlights barely illuminating the path ahead. Nathan's nerves were on edge, but he forced himself to stay focused. This was their chance to make a difference, to put an end to the horrors of the Harmony Project once and for all. As they approached the facility, the scale of the operation became apparent. The compound was vast, with multiple buildings surrounded by high fences and guarded by armed personnel. Riley worked quickly to disable the security cameras, allowing the team to slip inside undetected. Nathan and Evelyn documented everything they saw: cages filled with animals in various stages of experimentation, rooms lined with medical equipment, and researchers poring over data that blurred the line between science and monstrosity. But it was what they found in one of the facility's largest buildings that left them shaken. Inside were rows of tanks filled with a murky liquid, each containing a creature that defied understanding. Some were barely recognizable as animals, their bodies altered in ways that seemed both cruel and unnatural. Others appeared to be hybrids, their forms a grotesque amalgamation of species. Evelyn's hand trembled as she took photographs. This is beyond anything I imagined," she whispered. Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll expose this, all of it. They won't get away with this." The team worked quickly, gathering as much evidence as possible before retreating to their extraction point. As they made their way back through the jungle, the distant sound of alarms shattered the silence. Someone had discovered their presence. "Move!" Jack barked, taking the lead as the team broke into a run. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the thick foliage both a blessing and a curse as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Gunshots rang out in the distance, but the team managed to stay ahead of their pursuers, eventually reaching the safety of their rendezvous point. Back at their base, the team reviewed the footage and data they had collected. The evidence was damning, painting a clear picture of the facility's atrocities and its connections to the broader Harmony Project network. Karen's team immediately began preparing the story for release, ensuring that every detail was corroborated and every source protected. As the story broke, the global response was overwhelming. Governments, advocacy groups, and citizens demanded accountability, calling for immediate action to dismantle the Harmony Project and bring those responsible to justice. Investigations were launched, and several high-profile figures were arrested, their involvement in the project laid bare for the world to see. Despite the victory, Nathan knew their work was far from over. The Harmony Project's roots ran deep, and there were undoubtedly more secrets waiting to be uncovered. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Back at the sanctuary, Scout greeted him with an enthusiastic wag of the tail, a reminder of why they had fought so hard. "We did it," Nathan said softly, kneeling to embrace the puppy. "But there's still so much more to do." The weeks that followed the South America operation were a blur of activity and tension. The exposé on the Harmony Project's South American facility had sent shockwaves through the global community, leading to an unprecedented crackdown on illicit biotech operations. Investigations were launched in multiple countries, and several high-profile arrests were made. Yet, amid the victories, Nathan and Evelyn knew that their battle was far from over. At the sanctuary, life carried on with a mix of cautious optimism and relentless determination. Scout had become a symbol of resilience and hope, drawing visitors and supporters from all over. Donations poured in, allowing the team to expand their facilities and enhance security measures. But the heightened attention also brought new challenges. The sanctuary's staff remained on constant alert, acutely aware that their work had made them powerful enemies. One morning, as Nathan walked Scout along the sanctuary's wooded trails, Evelyn approached him with a stack of papers in hand. Her expression was serious, a stark contrast to the serenity of their surroundings. "We need to talk," she said, falling into step beside him. Nathan glanced at her, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" Evelyn handed him the papers. "Riley found something new in the files we recovered from the South American facility. It's disturbing." Nathan scanned the documents, his stomach tightening with each word. The files detailed a series of experiments conducted on animals that had shown heightened cognitive abilities. But what caught his attention was the mention of a secondary location, a facility described as the central hub for the Harmony Project's most advanced research. "This hub," Evelyn said, her voice low, "is where they're running the experiments that could push their work into truly catastrophic territory. If we don't stop them, everything we've done so far will mean nothing." Nathan felt a surge of anger and determination. "Do we know where it is?" Evelyn nodded. "It's in Europe. Riley's still piecing together the exact location, but we should have it within a few days. This could be the final piece of the puzzle." The days that followed were marked by intense preparation. Riley worked tirelessly to pinpoint the hub's location, while Jack and his team developed a strategy for infiltrating the facility. Karen coordinated with international journalists and advocacy groups, ensuring that the story would reach the widest possible audience once the evidence was secured. Despite the mounting pressure, Nathan found moments of solace in his routine with Scout. The puppy's unwavering trust and boundless energy were a constant reminder of why they were fighting so hard. Late one evening, as he sat on the porch with Scout curled up at his feet, Nathan allowed himself a moment of reflection. "We're going to finish this," he murmured, stroking the puppy's fur. "For you and every animal that suffered because of them." Scout let out a soft whine, leaning into his touch, and Nathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The breakthrough came sooner than expected. Riley burst into Nathan's office one afternoon, a triumphant smile on her face. "We've got it," she announced, setting her laptop on his desk. The hub is located in an abandoned military facility in Eastern Europe. It's remote, heavily guarded, and almost impossible to access without a solid plan. Nathan studied the map on her screen, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Then we make a plan," he said, "and we do it right. This has to be the end of the Harmony Project." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The team assembled a coalition of allies, including local activists, investigative journalists, and animal welfare organizations. Jack's military experience proved invaluable as he outlined a detailed strategy for infiltrating the facility. Every aspect of the mission was meticulously planned, from the timing of their approach to the backup contingencies in case something went wrong. On the night of the operation, the team gathered for a final briefing. Evelyn addressed the group, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "This is it," she said. "Everything we've done has led to this moment. We're not just here to expose the truth. We're here to stop these atrocities once and for all." The group responded with a mix of nods and murmurs of agreement. Nathan felt a surge of pride and determination as he looked around at the faces of his allies. They were an unlikely group, brought together by a shared mission to protect the voiceless and hold the powerful accountable. The approach to the facility was tense but uneventful. Jack's team led the way, their training and expertise ensuring that every step was taken with precision and caution. As they reached the perimeter, Riley worked quickly to disable the security systems, clearing the way for the team to move inside. What they found inside the facility was both horrifying and validating. The evidence of the Harmony Project's atrocities was everywhere. Cages filled with animals in various stages of experimentation, rows of medical equipment that spoke to the gruesome nature of the research, and files detailing plans to expand the project's reach. But it was in the facility's central lab that they found the most damning evidence. A series of monitors displayed live feeds from other locations, confirming that the Harmony Project's network was far more extensive than they had imagined. The files they recovered detailed connections to powerful corporations, government agencies, and private investors, painting a chilling picture of the scale and ambition of the operation. As the team worked to document everything, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Jack signaled for silence, motioning for the group to take cover. Moments later, a group of armed guards entered the room, their weapons at the ready. The standoff was tense, but Jack's team managed to disarm the guards without a single shot fired. The confrontation was a stark reminder of the risks they faced, but it also underscored their commitment to the mission. With the guards restrained and the evidence secured, the team made their way out of the facility, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and resolve. Back at their base, the team reviewed the evidence, ensuring that every detail was cataloged and protected. Karen's team worked tirelessly to prepare the story for release, coordinating with international media outlets to ensure maximum impact. As the final pieces fell into place, Nathan felt a sense of both relief and anticipation. The next morning, the story broke, sending shockwaves through the global community. The evidence was irrefutable, the connections undeniable. Governments and corporations scrambled to distance themselves from the Harmony Project, while advocacy groups and citizens demanded accountability and justice. At the sanctuary, the team watched the news coverage with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. They had achieved something monumental, but they knew the fight was far from over. The Harmony Project's network was vast, and there were undoubtedly more secrets waiting to be uncovered. As Nathan sat with Scout in the sanctuary's garden, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The puppy leaned against him, its blue eyes bright and trusting. Nathan smiled, his resolve stronger than ever. "We've come so far," he said softly. "But there's still more to do, and we'll face it together." The days that followed the release of the final exposé were a whirlwind of activity. The global response was overwhelming, with governments, advocacy groups, and citizens rallying together to dismantle the remnants of the Harmony Project. Arrests were made across multiple countries, and high-profile individuals were forced to resign in disgrace as their connections to the project were laid bare. The sanctuary became a focal point for the media, with reporters eager to cover the story and meet the puppy who had become a symbol of resilience. Nathan found himself busier than ever, juggling interviews, coordinating with legal teams, and ensuring the sanctuary's daily operations ran smoothly. Despite the chaos, he remained grounded by his bond with Scout. The puppy's unwavering loyalty and boundless energy were a constant source of comfort, reminding Nathan of why he had fought so hard. One afternoon, as Nathan walked through the sanctuary's lush gardens, he spotted Evelyn sitting on a bench, reviewing a stack of documents. She looked up and smiled as he approached, motioning for him to join her. "How's Scout?" she asked, setting the papers aside. Nathan chuckled, gesturing toward the nearby play area where Scout and Daisy were chasing each other through the grass. "Happy as ever. I think Daisy's finally accepted that Scout's here to stay." Evelyn laughed softly. "That's good to hear. They've both been through so much. It's nice to see them enjoying themselves." Nathan nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. You know, when I found Scout on the side of that road, I never could have imagined where this journey would take us. It's been hard, but I wouldn't change a thing. Evelyn reached out and placed a hand on his arm. None of this would have been possible without you, Nathan. You've given so many animals a second chance, and you've shown the world what's possible when we refuse to look away from injustice. Nathan felt a lump form in his throat, but managed to smile. We all played a part, and it's not over yet. There's still so much work to do. Evelyn nodded, her expression resolute. Then let's keep going. Together. In the weeks that followed, the sanctuary continued to grow, both in size and influence. Donations poured in from around the world, allowing the team to expand their facilities and rescue more animals than ever before. They launched educational programs, advocacy campaigns, and partnerships with other organizations, ensuring that the lessons of the Harmony Project would never be forgotten. Scout, meanwhile, became something of a celebrity. The puppy's story was shared in schools, on news programs, and even in a best-selling book that chronicled the sanctuary's journey. Visitors from all over came to meet Scout, whose gentle demeanor and playful spirit never failed to win hearts. For Nathan, seeing Scout thrive was the ultimate reward, a testament to the power of compassion and determination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sanctuary in a warm golden glow, Nathan stood by the fence overlooking the play area. Scout and Daisy were romping through the grass, their joyous barks echoing in the stillness. Evelyn joined him, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets as she watched the dogs with a smile. "It's peaceful, isn't it?" she said softly. Nathan nodded, his gaze never leaving the dogs. "It is. And it's moments like this that make it all worth it." They stood in companionable silence for a while, the weight of their journey finally beginning to lift. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nathan allowed himself to breathe deeply, to savor the simple beauty of the life they had built. As the stars began to emerge, twinkling in the vast expanse of the sky, Nathan turned to Evelyn. "Do you think we've made a difference?" Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with conviction. "I know we have, and we're just getting started." Nathan nodded, a sense of quiet determination settling over him. Together they had faced unimaginable challenges and uncovered truths that had shaken the world. But through it all, they had never wavered in their commitment to justice and compassion. And as he looked out at the sanctuary, at Scout and Daisy playing under the starlit sky, Nathan knew that their story was far from over. For every life they had saved, there were countless others still in need. And as long as there was work to be done, Nathan and his team would continue to fight for the voiceless, the vulnerable, and the forgotten. Because in the end, that was what truly mattered. The unwavering belief that even in the face of darkness, hope could prevail.